The quiet road. It was just past midnight when Sundar Pichai turned off the freeway onto a quiet, winding road lined with tall eucalyptus trees. The hum of the electric engine faded as he slowed down, his hands steady on the wheel. It had been a long day of meetings, interviews, and private visits across California. He wasn't heading home. Not yet. Something inside him, something heavy and visible, kept pulling him forward. The road was empty, the sky low and dark, full of unseen stars. The air felt thick, as if it carried unspoken truths. Inside the car, silence ruled, except for the soft rhythm of the tires gliding over the asphalt. Sundar didn't usually drive himself. Not anymore, but tonight he had insisted. No assistance, no drivers, no schedule. He didn't explain why. He just said, "I need to think." And so he drove alone, dressed in a plain gray sweater, dark jeans, and worn-out sneakers. No designer suit, no security escort. The CEO of one of the world's most powerful companies looked more like a college professor on a weekend retreat than a tech mogul. As he passed a roadside diner, its flickering neon sign barely holding on to life. Sundar caught a glimpse of his own reflection in the rearview mirror. Tired eyes, thoughtful expression. He didn't see the billionaire or the public figure. He saw a man searching for something he hadn't been able to name in years. Something personal. Something real. Earlier that day, after a keynote address about the future of artificial intelligence, Sundar had walked off stage to thunderous applause. But as the clapping faded behind him, he had felt none of the usual pride or satisfaction. Instead, he felt emptiness, the kind of hollow space that grows louder the more you try to ignore it. He had shaken hands, smiled for photos, answered questions, and nodded through praise. But a part of him wasn't there. A part of him had left long before the cameras turned on. That part was now driving down this road in the middle of nowhere, hoping to make sense of what it meant to be human in a world full of machines, algorithms, and expectations. He thought of his childhood in Chennai, the smell of rain on hot pavement, the way his mother used to fold his school uniform every morning with care. He thought of the train rides with his father, who taught him about engines and patience. And he thought of how far he had come, and how far he might have drifted from those roots. A soft flashing light appeared in the rearview mirror, breaking the flow of memory. Red and blue, a police car. Sundar's heart gave a tiny, unexpected jump. He glanced at the speedometer. He wasn't speeding. He pulled over anyway, slowing gently to the gravel shoulder. The cruiser stopped behind him, headlights flooding the inside of his car. His hands rested on the wheel, calm but alert. The kind of calm that lives on the edge of questions. A tall officer stepped out, walked toward the driver's side window. His flashlight beamed into Sundar's face. "Good evening, sir. Do you know why I stopped you?" Sundar shook his head, voice steady. "No, officer. I wasn't speeding, was I?" The officer leaned slightly forward, studying Sundar's features. "No, not at all. Your license plate came up with an alert. Mind showing me your registration and ID?" Sundar nodded, reached slowly into the glove box, pulled out the documents. The officer took them, looked down at the name, and paused. Then looked up again, more curious than before. "Sundar Pichai?" he asked. "Yes," Sundar replied softly. The officer stared for a beat longer. "As in the Sundar Pichai?" Sundar gave a slight smile. "That's right." The officer blinked, stepped back, as if unsure how to respond. I didn't expect." He trailed off. "I'm going to need a moment." He walked back to his cruiser, leaving Sundar alone in the glow of the dashboard. Minutes passed. Sundar sat still, watching the lights dance across the trees. He wasn't worried. Not exactly. But something felt off. Not with the officer, but with the moment itself. As if this unexpected stop was not a random event, but a fork in the road of his life. A sign that something was about to change. When the officer returned, his expression had shifted. He looked nervous, respectful, even slightly shaken. "Sir, I apologize for the stop. There's no issue with your vehicle. But there's something you need to see." Sundar raised an eyebrow. See? The officer nodded, glancing back at the cruiser. There's someone in the back of your car. Sundar's body went still. What? The thermal camera on our cruiser picked up movement. When we pulled up behind you, there was someone in your back seat. We saw the heat signature, but now it's gone. Sundar's breath caught. He turned and looked behind him. The back seat was empty. His mind raced. He had been alone when he got in. He had locked the doors, hadn't he? Do you mind stepping out of the vehicle, sir? The officer asked, now more serious. Sundar opened the door, stepping into the cool night air. Another officer joined, a young woman with sharp eyes and a firm posture. Together, they carefully opened the backseat doors, shining flashlights into every corner. Nothing. No signs of a break-in. No signs of anyone. Is this some kind of prank? Sundar asked, more to himself than to them. The officers shook their heads. The female officer spoke up. Sir, our systems don't malfunction like that. Something was there, or someone. We just want to be sure you're safe. A silence settled between them. Then Sundar's phone buzzed. He reached into his pocket and looked. A single message. From an unknown number. 3 words. You left me. His fingers went cold. The officers noticed the change in his expression. Is everything all right, sir? The female officer asked. He looked up slowly. I think, he said, voice low. This night is just beginning. Asterisk, the message of the glow from Sundar's phone. Screen lit up his face like a pale candle in the dark. The message sat there, silent and loaded, like a whispered voice in the middle of a scream. You left me, no sender, no context, no location tag. Just those 3 words, plain and haunting. The kind of message that doesn't ask for a response, it demands a reckoning. Sundar stared at it longer than he should have, hoping the meaning would shift or explain itself. But the words remained still, unmoving. They weren't typed in anger. There was no punctuation, no urgency. That made it worse. It felt like a ghost from the past reaching out with a quiet touch instead of a scream. A wound instead of a warning. The 2 officers noticed the tension growing in Sundar's jaw. The way his hand clenched around the phone just slightly. Sir, the female officer asked gently. Do you know who sent that? Sundar looked up slowly. His voice came out softer than usual, thoughtful. No, but I think it might be connected to something I've tried to forget. He didn't say more. Not because he was hiding something, but because he didn't have the full truth yet, not even for himself. He had spent years building systems of logic, layers of code, towers of information, but nothing in his life had ever taught him how to face a memory he didn't know was still alive. The officers offered to stay nearby, even run a trace on the number. Sundar politely declined. There was no threat, not yet. Just a question and a weight that now sat beside him. Invisible but real. Once they cleared him to leave, Sundar got back into the car. The driver's seat didn't feel the same anymore. It felt colder, heavier. He started the engine, but he didn't drive. Not yet. He opened his messages again, stared at the words. You left me. Then he did something he hadn't done in a long time. He replied, Who are you? For a moment, the message hung there, suspended in digital space. Nothing came back. Silence. And just when he started to believe that would be the end of it, his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a photo. Not an old one. Not pixelated. It had been taken that night minutes ago. It showed his car pulled over on the side of the road. The police cruiser behind it, its lights flashing in the background, but the photo had been taken from the trees. Someone had been watching. His breath froze in his chest. Someone had been close. Someone had seen everything. The photo wasn't threatening. It didn't show a weapon or a figure, but it was worse than that. It showed control. It said, I see you. I know where you are. And I want you to know I'm still here. Sundar gripped the steering wheel, not in fear, but in focus. He had faced rooms full of doubters. He had launched products with the eyes of the world upon him. But this was something different. This wasn't business. This was personal. And it had reached him in the one place he had always protected, his private, quiet self. He drove again. Not fast. Not slow. Just steady. But this time, he didn't choose the direction. He let instinct guide him, like following a whisper. The night felt heavier now, as if time itself had thickened. The trees blurred past him, their shadows stretching long across the road. Somewhere in that silence, something from his path was rising. 20 minutes later, he found himself pulling into a part of town he hadn't visited in years. It wasn't a planned route. His hands had moved almost on their own. The streets here were older, quieter, unpolished. They looked like memories too familiar, worn, and sometimes painful. He'd parked in front of a small building with peeling paint and a flickering light above the entrance. It used to be a community center. He remembered it from decades ago. Back when he had first moved to the States as a student, young and unsure, he had volunteered there during his early years, tutoring kids in math, helping older immigrants with job applications. He had come here for the warmth, a sense of place. It had helped him find his footing when the world felt too wide. He stepped out of the car, walking toward the building. The door wasn't locked. It creaked open with the weight of time. Inside, the place smelled like old wood and forgotten stories. Some of the old posters were still up, faded by years of dust and sunlight. He moved through the room slowly, memories brushing against him like leaves in a breeze. Then he saw something new. On the wall near the back. Someone had pinned a photo, fresh, untouched by time. It was of Sundar. But not the Sundar everyone knew. Not the public figure. It was a photo of him from his early days in America, backpack slung over one shoulder, jeans frayed at the bottom, smiling, but only with his eyes. Standing beside him in the photo was a boy maybe 12 or 13, skinny, wide-eyed, looking at Sundar. Like he was some kind of hero, Sundar stared at the picture. He remembered the boy. His name was Malik. A quiet kid from a broken home with a talent for numbers and a hunger for kindness. Sundar had mentored him for almost a year. They had met every week. Sundar had taught him math, but more than that, he had listened. Malik had trusted him, looked up to him. And then one day, Sundar stopped showing up. Not because he didn't care, because life moved too fast. His graduate program demanded more. Then internships. Then the job at Google. He had always meant to go back, to check in, to make it right, but he never did, and Malik had disappeared from his life like smoke through a window. Sundar's throat tightened. He reached out, touched the photo gently, like it might fall apart if he wasn't careful. His phone buzzed again. Another message. You remember now? This time? Sundar didn't hesitate. Yes. The reply came fast. Then come find me. A location followed. It was only 5 miles away. A small address near the edge of the city. A place he didn't recognize. He stood there in the community center for another moment, surrounded by the shadows of who he had been. Then he turned and walked out. When he got back in the car, the silence felt different. Not hollow anymore. It felt like something waiting to be heard. As he drove toward the address, 1,000 thoughts passed through him. Guilt, hope, fear, but more than anything, resolve. He hadn't expected this night to become a mirror, hadn't expected to be called back to the very thing he had left behind, but maybe this was the point. Every message is a threat. Some are invitations, and some ghosts aren't meant to haunt. They're meant to heal. He pulled into a narrow alley, the GPS telling him he had arrived. It was a small building, barely marked. A single light shone above the door. He stepped out. Took a breath, and knocked. From inside. He heard footsteps. A lock turned. The door creaked open. A face looked back at him. Grown now. No longer a boy, but unmistakably Malik. Asterisk, the unfinished promise for a moment. Sundar couldn't speak. The man standing in the doorway looked so familiar, yet so changed. Gone was the fragile, wide-eyed boy he had once known. In his place stood someone stronger, sharper, worn by time, but not broken. Malik's eyes held a strange mixture of calm and challenge. like he had waited too long for this moment to feel only one thing. Neither of them spoke at first. The air between them felt charged with years of silence, unasked questions, and emotions that had never found words. Sundar saw a flicker of something in Malik's face recognition. Yes, but also pain. Not fresh pain. Old pain, the kind that had been carried for so long it had left calluses behind. Malik, Sundar finally said, voice low, uncertain. I didn't know you were still in the city. Malik stepped back, opening the door wider. I figured. You wouldn't, he said, without bitterness. Just truth. Sundar hesitated, then walked in. The inside of the place was simple. Dim light, a few shelves filled with books and papers, a small couch with worn cushions. It looked like someone had lived here for years but never bothered to decorate. It wasn't messy. It was quiet, lived in, like a life that had learned how to survive without much help. Malik walked to the corner and sat on a wooden chair near a desk. He didn't offer Sundar a seat. Not out of coldness, just because it wasn't that kind of reunion. You've done well, Malik said, almost absently. I saw you on TV last month. AI conference, right? Everyone clapping. Your face on the screens. Sundar nodded slowly. Yeah, I've come a long way. Malik looked at him, then really looked. But did you ever look back? The question landed like a stone in the room. Not thrown in anger, but dropped with quiet weight. Sundar sat down on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees. He didn't look away. I thought about you, he said, more times than I can count. But you never came back, Malik replied. Again, no anger. Just truth sharpened by time. I didn't mean to disappear. Everything changed so fast. I kept telling myself I'd check in, reach out. But then, life happened. Yeah, Malik leaned back in the chair, folding his arms. It always does. But for some of us, life doesn't just happen. It hits. And when it hits hard enough, you stop waiting for people to come back. The words weren't meant to hurt. They were meant to reveal. Sundar could feel it. Malik wasn't trying to punish him. He was trying to show him the size of the space he had left behind. I was 19 when my mom died, Malik said, suddenly. His voice was steady, but his eyes drifted as if replaying something he'd seen too many times. Cancer. Aggressive. No money for treatment. No one to fight for us. Just me sitting in that hospital room, thinking about the people who used to care. You came to mind, more than once. Sundar closed his eyes. I'm sorry. I know, Malik said. But sorry doesn't stitch time back together. The silence that followed wasn't cold. It was necessary. Like both men needed space. To feel the weight of what hadn't been said for over a decade. After a while, Sundar looked up. Why now? Why reach out tonight? Malik took a breath, then walked to the small window, looking out at the alley beyond. His silhouette was long in the lamplight. Because something's wrong, he said. Sundar stood slowly. What do you mean? Malik turned to face him. I didn't just message you because of the past. I messaged you because you're in danger. And you don't even know it yet? The air thickened again. This time, with something sharper, darker, danger, Sundar asked. From who? Malik walked to a cabinet, opened it, and pulled out a small box. He placed it on the table. I've been watching something for a while. A pattern. Things that don't make sense. And the deeper I looked, the more I found your name. Not because you did something wrong, because you're being set up. Sundar moved closer. Opening the box. Inside were files, printouts, screenshots. Even a small USB drive. Some of the papers had red marker lines drawn across names and connections. Photos of meetings, documents, stamped with dates he didn't recognize. What is all this? He asked, flipping through the pages. Leaks, Malik said. Internal memos from companies tied to black market tech networks. Facial recognition tools sold to governments in secret. And one of the names that keeps showing up in the metadata? Yours. Sundar's hand stopped flipping. His eyes narrowed. I'd never authorized anything like that. I believe you, Malik said. But someone wants it to look like you did. And if they succeed, everything you've built, your reputation, your work, your integrity, it's all going to burn. Sundar sat down again, this time with the weight of the files in his hands. Everything about the night had shifted. What began as a strange message from the past had become a door to something far more dangerous. Why help me? He asked quietly. After everything, why not just let me fall? Malik's voice softened. Because you weren't the only one who disappeared. I disappeared too. From myself. From others, I spent years angry, disconnected. But I never forgot who you were when you showed up for me. Even if it didn't last, it mattered. He paused, and maybe this is my chance to show up for you. Sundar felt something move in his chest, not regret this time. Something closer to gratitude. But not the easy kind. The heavy kind, the kind that humbles. He looked down at the files again. Dates, names, data trails. Do you know who's behind it? Malik shook his head. Not yet. But I know where to look. And if you're willing, we can find out together. Sundar met his eyes. What do you need from me? Malik didn't answer right away. Benny said. Truth? And two things Sundar had always tried to control. And now they were the only way forward. Outside. The city slept on. But inside that quiet room, two men, once strangers by time, now allies by necessity, began to unravel a story far bigger than either of them had expected. Because sometimes redemption begins not with forgiveness, but with action. And sometimes the only way to protect the future is to finally face the past. Asterisk, the deep trail morning came slow and gray. The city outside Malik's apartment still slept under a soft curtain. A fog, the kind that made the world feel quieter, smaller, as if time itself was taking a deep breath. Inside, Sundar sat hunched over the desk, eyes tracing a pattern that was just beginning to take shape across the scattered documents. He hadn't slept. His fingers were stained with ink from the printed files, his mind racing faster than he could organize his thoughts. Each paper connected to another through quiet threads, emails, financial records, NDA-covered contracts signed in shadows. None of them pointed directly at him. And yet his name floated between the lines like a ghost. The metadata had been tampered with. Some of the documents contained forged approval signatures eerily close to his own. The language mimicked the tone of his official memos. Asterisk. Someone had studied him. Someone who knew how he wrote, how he moved, how he thought. Malik poured a cup of black coffee and handed it to Sundar, then sat across from him. He looked tired too, but not in the same way. His exhaustion came from years of watching, digging, questioning the silence between pings. Sundar's came from a different place, an emotional fatigue born from being blindsided by a war he hadn't known he was part of. You're looking at shell companies, Malik said. Some of them go back 6 years. They're all tied to contracts for experimental software, mostly surveillance tools. Most were buried under third-party development groups with no paper trail. But the weird part? A few of them have office addresses linked to Google's early satellite campuses. Sundar frowned. That shouldn't be possible. Those properties were sold or reassigned years ago, unless someone inside kept them active. A silence? Past that, Sundar knew what Malik was implying. An inside leak. Someone close. Maybe someone still working at the company. It sent a chill through him, not just because of the betrayal, but because it meant the infection hadn't come from the outside. It had grown from within. Malik stood and walked to the window, looking down at the alley. There's more, he said. Someone following you. They started tracking you 3 months ago. Hidden cameras at events. Mirrored emails. I picked it up by accident while investigating another data breach. Sundar's voice was quiet. How long have you been watching? Long enough to realize it's not just about you anymore, Malik said. They're using your identity to sign off on projects that go far beyond ethical boundaries. Military-grade AI. Predictive behavior mapping. Backdoor systems that can be injected into national infrastructure. Sundar's breath caught. Why me? Because you're the shield, Malik said. Your name is the cleanest. The most respected. If the world believes you're part of it, the rest of it won't even get questioned. It wasn't just a setup dot, it was a weaponization of trust. Sundar stood and began to pace, each step heavy. This could destroy everything. Not just my career. People's faith in what we're building, in what AI could become. Malik nodded. That's the point. Outside, the fog was beginning to lift. Faint sunlight began to break through, drawing shadows across the apartment floor. We need a way in, Sundar said. Whoever's behind this, they've erased their fingerprints. We need something deeper, something they missed. Malik reached for the USB drive from the box. I saved one trail. It was buried under an old research project, something abandoned 3 years ago. A development environment built for a prototype AI named Helios. It was supposed to map emotional responses in real-time conversation. Sundar looked confused. That was never released. Exactly. But someone's still using it. It's been repurposed? Not for emotional insight, Malik hesitated, then added, for control. He plugged in the drive and pulled up a terminal. Lines of code scrolled across the screen, familiar but altered. Sundar leaned in, eyes scanning. Fast. And then he saw it. A hidden loop dot buried deep within the AI's learning architecture. Someone had inserted a recursive trigger that could manipulate the user's emotional state based on environmental cues. It was subtle, elegant, and dangerous. It's a behavior override, Sundar whispered. It adapts to the subject, reshapes its answers based on psychological markers. This isn't AI, it's conditioning. Malik tapped a few keys, revealing a list of user logs, hundreds of entries. Each, one tagged with device IDs, timestamps, and emotional outcome categories. They're testing it in the real world, he said. Conversations through apps, smart devices, maybe even public kiosks, but always under the surface. And all of it under your name. Sundar stared at the screen. This wasn't just fraud. This was theft of identity, of morality, of future. He had spent years trying to teach the world that technology could be kind, ethical, human. Now, someone was using his signature to teach machines how to manipulate the very people they were meant to help. He felt something heavy move inside him. Not just anger, not just betrayal, something deeper. A kind of grief. The grief of realizing that what you built to protect could be used to control, and that the face they would blame was yours. We need to expose this, Sundar said. Go. Public. Take it to the right people. The board. The press. Malik shook his head. Not yet. They'll shut you down before you even open your mouth. We have to find the source first. Trace it to the person pulling the strings. Then we move. Sundar nodded, jaw set. Where do we start? Malik hesitated, then opened another file. It was an email, encrypted, marked urgent. This came in last night, Malik said. Anonymous sender. They claimed to have access to the original Helios code, uncorrupted, and they're willing to meet. Tonight? Where? Malik turned the screen so Sundar could see. It was an old train station. Decommissioned 10 years ago. Remote. Barely marked on maps. Sundar's. Pulse ticked up. Feels like a trap. Maybe, Malik said. But it's the only lead we have. Sundar looked down at the files, the names, the twisted echoes of his own voice used for things he never approved. Then he looked at Malik, older, stronger, but still carrying the weight of a friendship broken and rebuilt. Then we go, Sundar said. Together. And in that moment, something shifted, not just in their investigation, but in the ground beneath their shared story, because they weren't just chasing shadows. They were reclaiming what had been stolen. Outside, the sun finally broke through the clouds, flooding the room with light. But deep down, both men knew the darkest part of the trail was still ahead. Asterisk. The shadow beneath the station's sun had long dipped below the horizon when Sundar and Malik pulled off the empty highway and turned down a narrow, crumbling road that wound like a forgotten thread through the hills. The silence outside was absolute. No street lamps, no Passing cars, not even the faint hum of distant life. The world felt paused. Above them, the sky was ink black, its stars hidden behind thick clouds. The only sound was the low growl of the engine as they approached their destination. Ghosts from another time. The train station sat at the edge of a dried-up freight yard, surrounded by fences eaten through by rust. The building itself was a relic from another era. Brick walls chipped with age, windows boarded, roof sagging like it carried a century of secrets. Faded graffiti ran along the platform like scars. A broken sign still hung above the entrance. Barely legible, the letters spelling out a name no one said anymore. They parked in the shadows, out of sight. Neither spoke as they stepped out. Both men were dressed simply dark clothes. No logos, no shine. Sundar had tied his shoes tighter than usual, as if preparing for something physical, even though he didn't know what. Malik carried a backpack, packed carefully with 2 flashlights, a portable battery, a signal jammer, and the USB drive with the Helios logs. He also carried something he hadn't told Sundar about yet, a small recording device sewn into his jacket lining. A precaution, just in case. As they stepped onto the old platform, a light flickered deep inside the station. A single bulb swinging gently, as if someone had just walked past it. Sundar slowed, glancing at Malik. "We're not alone." Malik nodded. "Stay behind me. If anything goes sideways, we split and meet at the drop point." They pushed open the wooden doors, which groaned under their own weight. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the ghost of oil and metal. The space opened into a wide hall where passengers once waited, long before algorithms, satellites, and smartphones ruled. The world. The walls bore the stories of time in silence. Old ticket windows, shattered glass, forgotten benches where people once sat, dreaming of places far away. Got in the center of the hall. Beneath the hanging bulb stood a man. His face was mostly in shadow, but he wore a brown coat too thin for the weather, and a black knit cap. In one hand, he held a metal briefcase. In the other, nothing. Malik stepped forward first. "You sent the email?" The man nodded. "You brought the logs?" "They're safe," May have said. "Who are you?" The man's voice was dry, calm, practiced. "I used to work on the Helios project. Before it was shelved. Before they decided to take it in a different direction. Sundar asked. The man's eyes met his. And for the first time, Sundar saw fear there. Not fear of being caught, but fear of something deeper, of a truth too dangerous to live inside one man's head for too long. "You need to understand," the man said. "Helios was never meant to be what it became. The early models could predict emotional shifts, help therapists, guide mental health support. But then someone realized it could do more. It could be taught to control those shifts instead. Not just respond to human emotion, but shape it." Malik pulled out the USB drive. "We've seen the modified code." "What you've seen," the man said, "is just the surface. They've gone deeper. They're building a version of Helios that doesn't just monitor behavior. It influences decisions subtly, quietly, invisibly, like wind shaping the sand. It doesn't tell you what to do. It makes you feel like it was your idea all along." Sundar stepped forward, tension in his voice. "Who's they?" The man hesitated, then opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. He handed it to Sundar. Inside were documents with names, internal memos, and one printed photograph. A boardroom, faces blurred except for one clear, focused, unmistakable. It was someone Sundar knew. Someone high-ranking, someone he trusted. Someone who still worked inside. "Google," Sundar's stomach turned. "No," he said softly. "That's not possible." She already did, the man said. "She's the architect of the Black Network. She built the shell companies. She modified the signatures. Everything traces back to her." Malik's jaw tightened. "And you're just now coming forward?" The man looked down, guilt across his face. "I was part of it once. I helped to write the early versions of the new code. I didn't know what they were planning until it was too late. And by then, I was scared. They have power. Reach. They watch everything. Sundar ran a hand through his hair. We have to go to the authorities. You can't, the man said quickly. They've already compromised parts of the system. You try to go public, they'll frame you before you. Take your next breath. The narrative is already written. You're the perfect scapegoat? Malik was already pacing, thinking, planning. Then, what's your play? Why meet us? The man hesitated again, then said, because the final version of Helios is about to be deployed. Sundar looked up sharply. What? In 48 hours, the man continued, they're going to integrate it into a major rollout of a new product. Something public. Something that will reach millions instantly. Once it's live, it can begin shaping user behavior without detection. They've hidden the code in layers of optimization updates. No one will even know it's there. What? Product? Malik asked. The man shook his head. I don't know. They kept that part locked, but it's big. They're calling it the ignition switch. After that, there's no going back. A sound broke through the stillness. A sharp crack. Like a twig snapping. Malik turned his head. Too late. A red dot appeared on the man's chest before anyone could speak. The shot echoed through the station. The man dropped to the floor, blood blooming fast beneath him. Malik yanked Sundar back behind a column, both men hitting the ground as another shot shattered the hanging light bulb above them. Darkness swallowed. The hall, sniper. Malik hissed from the shadows. Boots began to move. Not police, not local thugs. These steps were trained. Methodical, calculated. Sundar single quotes as heart slammed in his chest. The air smelled like dust and gunpowder. His ears rang. Beside him, Malik pulled a small device from his jacket and activated an anti-surveillance jammer. A faint hum filled the space around them, blurring the digital trail. They crawled toward the side exit, hearts pounding. Behind them, more steps entered the station. Silent, no shouting, no names. Just boots and breath as they pushed through the door and stumbled out into the cold night air. Sundar looked back one last time. The man's body lay still beneath a broken light. But in his jacket pocket, still untouched, was the folder. Sundar doubled back. Malik grabbed his arm. What are you doing? We need it, Sundar said. Before Malik could stop him, Sundar ran. He slid to the floor, grabbed the folder, and turned. A figure stood near the doorway. Face masked. Gun raised. They locked eyes for a moment. Then out. Of the darkness, a second figure tackled the gunman from behind. Another shot rang out. This time, it hit concrete. Sundar didn't wait. He ran back through the side door. Back into the open air. Malik pulled him into a hidden path along the yards. Fence. Ducking low. Breathing hard. They didn't stop running until the only thing they could hear was the pounding of their own hearts. When they finally reached the car, Sundar collapsed into the passenger seat, folder clutched to his chest like it was the last piece of truth left in the world. They drove in silence, fast and hidden. The headlights off until they were deep into the hills again. No words. Not yet. But both men knew. The game had changed. What started as a search for redemption had become a fight for control of the future itself. The ignition switched on, broke like a slow exhale across the hills, painting the sky in faded amber and steel blue. Sundar sat on the roof of a safe house owned by a trusted contact of Malik's, an old hacker turned reclusive activist who lived off the grid. Below him, the world began to wake up. Distant towns flickered to life, unaware of the storm building above them. To the people in those homes, it was just another day. But for Sundar and Malik, it was the last quiet breath before everything changed. Inside, Malik worked silently, eyes fixed to 3 separate monitors. His fingers moved like fire across the keys. Windows opened, closed, then reopened in layers of encrypted tunnels, ghost servers, and darknet logins. In front of him sat the folder recovered from the train station, and the USB drive now clutched like a lifeline. The folder had confirmed the worst. Helios was real. Not just a corrupted experiment, not just a side project. It had evolved into something else. something hidden in plain sight. A code fragment called Nexus 9, buried deep inside a software update scheduled to release that very day to the world. It was a simple optimization patch. A performance boost. Nothing flashy to those who built it in the shadows. It was the ignition switch. Once activated, the AI would begin pulling behavioral cues from millions of users, silently influencing decisions based on emotional triggers. Choices, political leanings, even daily habits, and all of it traced back to one name, Sundar Pichai. He had become the unwitting symbol, the credibility shield, the illusion of trust behind the machine. And now, the only way to stop it was to break everything he'd helped build. It's wired into the primary update servers. Malik said eyes not leaving the screen. Once the push goes live, every connected device will get the update within 22 minutes. Phones, homes, even medical networks. Sundar stood behind him, silent. Everything he had ever created, believed in, invested in, was about to be used to manipulate the very people it was meant to empower. Can we stop it? He asked. Malik glanced at him, voice low. Not through the official channels. They're blocked. Even whistleblowing won't work. The board's already primed with fake reports. If we go public now, you'll look like the one trying to cover up. Sundar nodded, slowly absorbing the weight. Then we go louder, he said. Malik paused. What do you mean? We don't leak it, Sundar said, stepping forward. We detonate it. He laid out a plan, dangerous, fast, and nearly impossible. But it was the only way. They would hack the live stream. The company had a global keynote scheduled that morning, an event to showcase a new milestone. It would be viewed by millions, world leaders, media, partners. Sundar would take control of the feed. Not to talk about innovation. Not to celebrate the future. But to reveal the truth. In full view of the world. Malik stared at him. They'll come after you. This will burn everything. Sundar's voice was steady. Then let it burn. The future isn't worth saving if we have to lie to get there. Within 2 hours, Malik had breached the firewalls. They slipped past the redundancies, masked their IPs, bounced through enough proxies to confuse even the best counter-intrusion systems. By 10:57 a.m., they had gained access. The keynote was scheduled to begin at 11 o'clock. Sundar sat in front of the camera. No suit, no stage. Just him in a plain shirt. Eyes tired, voice raw. Malik nodded. You're lit in 60 seconds. Sundar stared into the lens. Outside, the sunlight had sharpened, cutting through the room like truth. And then they were live. Every screen across the company's global network switched. The audience didn't see a conference stage. They saw Sundar. Quiet, unfiltered, unprotected. He began to speak. This isn't a keynote, he said. This is a confession. His voice echoed across continents, through conference rooms, home offices, phones, classrooms. He spoke of Helios, the manipulated code of Nexus-9. He showed the documents, the timelines, the photos, the names, the betrayal. He admitted his failure. To see it sooner, and then he made it personal. I spent my life believing technology could be good, he said. That it could serve people, help them grow, heal, connect. I still believe that. But when we stop watching what we build, when we let ambition blind ethics, we become something worse than careless. We become dangerous. He paused. This isn't about saving a company or a name. It's about saving trust. And trust only lives where truth is told. Malik triggered the final move. A direct payload to the servers containing Nexus-9. A self-replicating command injected into the source code. Not to destroy the system, but to make it visible. Every line of manipulated code. Every forged signature. Every corrupted decision path. Live streamed, open sourced, mirrored across thousands of independent servers. Impossible to delete. The world would see everything. And they did. By noon. The company's shares began to fall by 2 p.m. Internal investigations were launched by 6 p.m. The woman behind the shadow network had vanished. Her accounts drained. Her trail cold, but it didn't matter. The truth was out, and it had a name. Not Sundar, Pichai, not Malik, not even Helios. The name was accountability. 3 days later, Sundar appeared before the press. No teleprompter. No shield. He announced his resignation. Not in shame. In honor. Leadership, he said, means owning not just our successes, but our blind spots. And sometimes the best way to lead is to step aside. He left the stage to a silence more powerful than applause. And somewhere across the world, in a quiet room lit by nothing but a laptop screen, Malik watched the moment unfold. He didn't smile. He didn't cry. He just closed the window. And whispered, "We did it." But the story didn't end there. Months later, the broken pieces of the company were rebuilt, this time with stronger checks. More voices. Clearer ethics. Helios was never revived, but its lesson lived on. Sundar moved quietly after that. No spotlight. No headlines. He traveled more. Met people. Listened.